Hi everyone, so I'm going to be switching it up a bit today and talking about happy cows. So interest in increasing animal welfare is at an all-time high. One way to do this is through environmental enrichment, which aims to increase the complexity of an animal's environment, allowing it to increase the range of behaviours it can perform. One example of this for dairy cattle is the use of grooming brushes like these ones, and I'm sure we've all seen videos like these doing the rounds on social media with the general public loving these types of interactions, leaving comments such as, "It makes me feel happy," and quote, "happy cow milk tastes better," end quote. Although the use of environmental enrichment is increasing for more intensively managed systems, research regarding enrichment for pasture-based systems is lacking, and this could be because it's generally considered that these animals are less behaviourally restricted. However, not all pasture-based environments are created equal, and it's not an uncommon or wrong practice to graze cattle on lush green pastures that are otherwise devoid of features like these three you can see on the top and the left. These differing characteristics, for example the presence of trees, potentially give natural enrichment opportunities to livestock, but in their absence some behaviours may be prevented. To determine which enrichments and therefore behaviours are important to pasture-based cattle, I presented 8 groups of 7 animals with 4 enrichments simultaneously. So down in the bottom corner you can see I used a stump, a hanging rope, a grooming brush and finally a wood chip pile. I then monitored how they used these enrichments during daylight hours for 2 days a week over a period of 3 weeks. So this shows how often they used the enrichments, and it's separated by day number and enrichment type. So from left to right we have brush, rope, stump and wood chip. Hopefully you can see that for all objects, enrichment use peaked in the first week, and then this declined as they became more habituated over time. Hopefully you can also see that for the wood chip, but particularly for the brush, enrichment use was more maintained in these final weeks than for the other 2 enrichments, which indicates these may be more preferred and valued by the cattle. Hopefully you can also see that there are peaks in enrichment use in the early morning and late afternoon period, so around sunrise and sunset, which are represented by the dark blue bars at the bottom and the lighter blue ones at the top. This also shows how the enrichments were used as a % of total time spent interacting with them all. So on the left in purple is the wood chip pile, and this accounted for over 50% of all time spent interacting with the enrichments, but it actually had a lower frequency of use than the brush. This is because most of these interactions were either standing or lying on the pile for long amounts of time, sometimes well over an hour without getting off. What I think is more interesting is that when combined, grooming on the brush, the stump, and even the post that the rope was attached to accounted for 36% of all interactions. Now this seems to be surprisingly high, as when housed on pasture, cattle spend less than 1% of their time grooming. However, we saw that as a group, these cattle spent on average an hour and 20 minutes each day grooming on these objects, which accounts for around 2% of their time budget. Although this still doesn't seem like a lot, we still saw twice the amount of grooming than we were expecting to see, and this indicates that this behaviour is important and may be rewarding to the cattle, which is not too surprising since it helps with coat cleanliness, and studies have linked it to de-arousal and having a calming effect in cattle. Now, although this study was performed on beef cattle, it still has relevance to the dairy industry, but there are considerations to be taken when comparing the two. Most importantly, the cattle in these studies were only moved from their paddock once a week, so it isn't known how enrichment use might change when moved more regularly due to milking, especially if this occurs during those peak time periods of enrichment use that I mentioned earlier. I'm also not suggesting that every paddock on every farm needs a brush. It's highly likely that the presence of objects already in the paddock, such as trees, provide just as much of an opportunity to groom as a brush does. It may also be possible to strategically place these brushes, say at the exit to the milking shed. However, this leads to other questions, such as does this limited access provide enough of an opportunity to groom? Does it increase competition, which can disadvantage more subordinate animals? Or does it impact the flow of exit from the shed? Overall, the provision of enrichments, which allow for important and motivated behaviours to be performed, should be considered for both intensively managed and pasture-based cattle, as it can promote positive welfare, which may have flow-on effects for production, along with increasing consumer perception of the industry, although these benefits still need to be quantified. Thank you.
Emily? Any question for Emily?
Any plans to do this in dairy cattle?
There's quite a lot overseas that I know of. I would like to see if there's demand for it.
You can fund it to do that.
Sorry?
So Nico can fund it.
Any other question? Ian?
Yeah, this is a little passage about the study design, and so you have 4 groups that then replicated, so each of the groups was then exposed.
So I had, ooh, that was really loud. I had 4 paddocks. Each one had all 4 enrichments in it. So I had no control or, as such, and it was simply comparing the amount of time. Yep, all 4 at once. Yep.
Any last question? Jane? It's possible. I did want to look at individual animals, how it affected the use around them, but because I used a lot of video cameras, I couldn't pick up on this. But we did see, especially right before sunset, most animals would run to the pile and there'd be a lot of play fighting and topple one. Yep.